My name is Megan Day, and I am a student at Sequoia High School. My school code is 1360. This is my individual oral commentary. This passage is an excerpt from the Elizabeth Bishop Complete Set of Poems by Elizabeth Bishop. The poem I will be doing my individual oral commentary on is The Filling Station by Elizabeth Bishop. The speaker of this passage or poem can be inferred to be an observer of a family filling station. We know this because on line 10, the narrator writes, quote, "It is a family filling station and quite thoroughly dirty." He says this after observing the family and this filling station for the previous 10 lines. The context of this poem is that the narrator is observing a family filling station, and he writes about and studies or states the relationship between a father and son, a dog, and he also observes the area of the filling station by describing it as dirty and focusing on all the little details and the appearance of this filling station. The audience of this text was intended for the readers of Elizabeth Bishop poems in the 1900s and continue on to a broader audience of viewers still today. The subject of this poem is that in this poem, the narrator is observing a family's filling station, and he ponders how this family lives in such a dirty and poor state. In the filling station, I observe various uses of visual imagery. Visual imagery can be found in the first stanza between lines 1 and 4 when the narrator writes, quote, "Oh, but it is dirty, this little filling station, oil-soaked, oil-permeated to a disturbing overall black truancy." Here the narrator writes about the filling station with the repetition of it being extremely dirty, and here he utilizes visual imagery to show how little this family actually has and how he is almost stunned with exactly how little and how this filling station is not kept up, and he seems, or we can infer, that this narrator almost is or believes to be above and greater than the people living at this filling station. Visual imagery is also present in the second stanza between lines 5 and 9 when he writes, quote, "Father wears a dirty, oil-soaked monkey suit that cuts under the arms, and several quick and saucy, a greasy son assists him." Here the narrator chooses to utilize visual imagery because he is able to portray what little the dad has, and here we see the appreciation that the father has and the positive relationship between the son and the father. There's also visual imagery in the third stanza when the narrator describes the cement porch between lines 13 and 16 when he writes, "It has a cement porch between the bumps and on it a set of crushed and grease-impregnated wickerwork." He now shifts from describing the family and who actually lives here to the setting that they live in when he utilizes the tone of crushed, grease, and impregnated. There is a negative connotation associated with the beginning of this poem, and the narrator and observer of this family seems to see them as inferior of himself and questions their lifestyle. There is also a contrast of darkness and color. The repetition of dirtiness and darkness can be present on line 3 when he talks about the black translucency, the greasy sun, and the cement porch all have a lack of color in them. However, in the fourth stanza, the narrator writes in lines 19 through 22, quote, "Some comic books provide the only note of color or certain color. They lie upon a big, dim dolly." The usage of color in this passage shows the positive outlook on life and how there's a shift in tone throughout the filling station that occurs in the fourth stanza. By the mentioning of color, we see the transition that the observer and narrator has in this poem from almost judging this family and how dirty it is to seeing the outlook and positivity that this family has on life. And this can be seen through the little spot of color that he observes in the comic books. The poem is also a continuous enjambment, and there is anaphora present in the last two stanzas. Lines 26 through 28, the lines all start with why, when they write, "Why the extraneous plant? Why the tabaret? Why, oh why the dolly?" The narrator says why because he's questioning and wondering exactly how this family is to live, and he shows so much judgment for this family and begins to question their lifestyle explicitly and moves past his judgmental comments. He also mentions anaphora in the sixth stanza when he writes, "Somebody embroidered the dolly, somebody waters the plants, somebody arranges the rows of cans," and concludes the poem in line 36 by writing, "Somebody loves us all." Through this anaphora, we see the transition of questioning this family and wondering exactly how they live to concluding that they live and flourish under love. And we see his judgments and how they come together and conclude, and how he is able to see that love is given this family much more than money. There's also a symbol of innocence, and this appreciation that the family has can be seen through the symbolism of the dog. Their dog is present on lines 17 and 18 when it writes, "On the wicker sofa, a dirty dog quite comfy." The dog that is mentioned symbolizes the innocence and vulnerability of the family, and how a dog that is given so little, like this family, has realized and been able to move past how little they've been given and thrive through love. In the fifth stanza, there are rhetorical questions. These questions are on lines 26 through 28. They read, again, "Why the extraneous plant? Why the tabaret? Why, oh, why the dolly?" These questions are present and extremely important because they show this author's and the narrator and how they contemplate how this family is living, and it shows the shift in thinking and the change in tone or connotation to that of being that the family, or he knows that the family is valuing love, and his judgments, because he was quick to judge, which can be inferred through his repetition of dirty and darkness, shifts, and how after he questions his actions and thoughts, he realizes that somebody loves us all. In this passage, we learn that through the narrator, first judgments and thoughts that can be observed about people are not always correct, and that everyone lives a different lifestyle, and though this family has been given so little, they remain to be comfortable and happy. As a result of this passage, the reader understands and realizes the impact of how an outlook on life can change opportunity and overall happiness. This passage causes us to contemplate the importance of money in society and if money can provide true happiness. It also causes us to contemplate, and Elizabeth Bishop concludes and states that money does not always provide happiness and that first judgments are not always accurate.